So that previous session was a little bit full of law, wasn't it? Kind of beat you down. Now I'm going to try to build you up and show you how you can actually maintain good mental health, good family health, good health in general, physical health in your ministry by in summary, the word is resilience. And I'm going to define resilience, encourage you on understanding yourself, also understanding others in order to build your resilience. So defining resilience, well, it's from the Latin verb salire, which means to jump. So resilience means to jump back. It means back or again, jumping back, jumping again. So you get knocked down, you jump back up. Get pushed back, you jump back forward. Resilience. It's defined by psychologists as a positive or effective reaction to trauma or stress. Again, being a pastor, being in the ultimate caring profession is stressful. So we want to help you develop your resilience, and I hope that this does help you do that. Again, the definitions focus on stressful events. So resilience in a family is the path the family follows as it adapts and prospers in the face of stress. You can prosper as a pastor. You've seen it. You can do it. It's the ability to bounce back from adversity, the capacity to rebound from adversity, strengthen and more resourceful. These are all definitions of resilience. It's building a capacity. It's the capacity to cultivate strengths to positively meet the challenges of life. So what are stressful events? Well, there's some obvious ones, the death of a spouse or a child or a parent. There's job and career changes, income changes, fires and natural disasters. We've seen flooding in Florida, flooding in the mid-Atlantic region. We're sort of seemingly always being confronted with accidents and injuries in war and in otherwise motor vehicle accidents. Someone is assaulted, there's acute illnesses that people are dealing with. Stressful events must be handled or they will overwhelm. They must be handled. And resilient people handle them better. Extremely stressful events, of course, might cause post-traumatic stress disorder. But stressful events are, again, by definition, outside of normal experiences. We define acute stressful events, but there's also chronic stressful events. And these are actually more potent. So an acute event, a sudden event, one-time event, motor vehicle accident. My neighbor was in a motor vehicle accident, lost his leg. That was very stressful, very traumatic for him. And typically that's what we think about when we think of stress. We don't often think about chronic stress, stress in roles, in relationships, stress in health. So some careers, by definition, are inherently challenging. Much of family stress is usually not acute. Family stress of poverty, family stress of mental health problems. These are things that endure. They are chronic. They're chronically stressful. They might come and go in terms of severity, but they're sort of always there. And we can develop capacity. We can develop our capacity to be resilient in the face of them. Many health issues are long-lasting. Diabetes is a lifetime condition. Again, I don't think my doctor's very good. I've been seeing him for a long time. I'm still diabetic. I've told him that, don't worry. But many health issues are long-lasting. Cancer treatments, you get a cancer diagnosis, get treatment for it, overcome it, seemingly get rid of it, but you still go back over and over again to see if the cancer has returned. Stress on pastors. We talked about this a little bit earlier. The research findings about what pastors report. 75%, 3/4 of pastors, when asked, say that they are either extremely or highly stressed. The vast majority, 9 in 10, say that they work anywhere from 55 to 75 hours a week. They say 9 in 10, they are fatigued, they feel worn out every week. They say they're grossly underpaid. Over 1 in 4 report a serious conflict with the parishioner monthly. Now, this isn't a meta-analysis. This isn't a summary of lots and lots of surveys. This is a single survey, so you take it for what it's worth. These figures are probably not hard and fast, but conflict with a member at a church, that's not uncommon. Feeling fatigued, working too many hours, being underpaid, probably fits at least some, if not a lot, of pastors. Many report lower self-esteem since entering the ministry. About 1 in 3, a lot larger than 1 in 5, 1 in 3 report that they fight depression. Some struggle with substance use disorders, trying to fight off that depression, not feel the depression, trying to numb themselves. There's a common concern among pastors that the ministry has negatively affected their families. Living in a glass house with glass walls where everyone can see inside. Everyone knows pastor's spouse's name. Everyone knows how pastor's kids are doing, or it might feel that way anyway. Many pastors, unfortunately, do not have someone they consider a close friend. It's a little bit of an opening for us here. Half don't meet regularly with other pastors. Here's another opening for us to develop more resilience. These are not signs of resilience, not having someone close that you can talk to besides your spouse, not meeting regularly with other pastors. Many acknowledge that they neglect study of the Bible. They neglect their prayer life because they're so busy being a pastor. Many don't take a regular day off. Most have never taken a sabbatical, which might be as short as a month, 6 weeks. Most have never taken even that much time off. Over half say they did not receive adequate training. I know that you do here. Adequate training. I was getting glared at by Brad there. Most say they did not receive adequate training to meet the demands of ministry. And yet, 80% would still choose to be a pastor. 65% say they are happy and fulfilled. Probably including some of those, because depression and happiness, as Luther showed us, when grieving the upcoming death of his father, being depressed and happy are not contradictory. You can't be either or. 65% say they're happy and fulfilled. 90% say the current church is treating them well. Don't ask the wife. Number is cut in half if you ask the wives, how is the church treating your husband? The top reasons that pastors quit. The 24/7 mentality. I'm never off work. I'm never not able to take some time off this job. And it really, 24/7 it really should always probably read 24/7 52. The 52 being the 52 weeks in a year. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Income issues. My family can't afford for me to keep this position. Conflict with someone at church. Feeling burned out, the stress on family. Pastors can go and have conflict at church. Pastors' wives cannot go and have conflict at church, even if they want to. There's not a pastor who hasn't had his wife get upset about the way he was treated, but she can't do anything about it. Stress on the family, feeling unappreciated, feeling isolated. Stress is one of the top reasons. Not stressful incidents, but stressful daily lives. Stress in roles and relationships are particularly salient, important. So resilience. Resilience is the ability to cope with life's challenges and to adapt to adversity. Resilience helps us maintain well-being in difficult circumstances. Your levels of resilience can change over the course of your life, sometimes more resilient than others. If we think about it just for a moment, and this was pointed out to me when I gave this talk to a different group, including pastors' wives, one of the pastors' wives who was serving in the military, Army Reserves. She stood up and talked, and I came to realize military training is all about training in resilience. That's all it is. Sure, there's strength training, but there's so much mental training. Training them to be resilient, to deal with the stress of the job that they're about to embark on. In other words, resilience can be learned. Changes over the course of a life can be trained in doing it. In other words, resilience can be learned. And it is something that you can learn. So let's start with maybe how resilient are you? Again, as a scale I found when putting together this talk, we saw the compassion satisfaction, the compassion fatigue scale. This is a resiliency scale. They go together. And again, we won't have you take this, but looking at some of the items of it. 1, not at all. 5, to a great extent. This is just like me. So the more likely the more that you would say, yes, I am like this, the more resilient you are. So these are some 24 different definitions, 24 ways of describing aspects of resilience. The first, in a crisis or a chaotic situation, I am calm and focus on taking useful actions. That's interesting. That's sort of a resilient person for sure. How about this one? I have regularly scheduled social engagements. I go out a lot and have fun. I'm realistic about what I can accomplish. I'm optimistic. I tend to see difficulties as temporary. I tolerate ambiguity and uncertainty. I adapt quickly. Number 7, I find humor in tough situations. I'm okay with myself if I make mistakes. Remember the job ad, perfectionism? I'm okay with myself if I make mistakes. I have friends I can ask for help. 50% of pastors say in that survey that they don't have a close friend. I'm self-confident. I like to try new ways of doing things. I learn valuable lessons from my experiences, whether good or bad. I can laugh at myself. I don't take things personally. That's really hard for those of us in the caring profession. It's really hard for us not to take the professional personal, but it's something that we can strive to do, because regardless of how we feel personally, we are limited in what we can do professionally. I'd like to stand up here and be able to say to you, everyone I've ever seen for psychotherapy, for counseling, got better. That's simply not true. My skill level has not changed. It's gotten better over the years. Every pastor in here would say that. They've gotten better in their call, in what they do, but still can't save everybody. I'm not non-judgmental about others and adapt to people's different styles. I'm not sure that applies here. Number 17, I have hobbies and pursuits that I enjoy. Let's just shorten that to I enjoy. I'm most effective when I'm free to do what I think is best. I read people well. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But it helps a lot if you can. I have an independent spirit. I'm a good listener. If you're not, you can learn to do that. I try to be supportive. I easily talk to others in my situation about my own stresses and struggles. I'm going to repeat that one. I easily talk to others in my situation about my own stresses and struggles. My struggles have made me stronger. That would be the last one. How resilient are you? Well, some of the items reflect the way that you think about problems. On that resiliency scale, some of the items are, well, how do you think about your challenges? Are you emotional? Do you take them personally? Do you think to yourself, foolishly perhaps, I should never have a challenge. I should never have a problem. Or are you optimistic? Do you have a sense of humor about things? What about your emotional intelligence? Do you understand yourself? Do you understand other people emotionally? Something that you can develop, mostly by working on opening up yourself to the fact that you are a human being and do have emotions, and not always are they good. It's really easy to talk about being happy, really easy to talk about being optimistic, to looking forward to things. But what about when you're not happy? What about when you're sad? What about when you're stressed? What about when you're not enjoying things as much? Can you talk about those as well? Some of us have more difficulty doing that than others. Problems require flexibility. Problems probably require, almost always require interacting with others who might not see the things the same way. It also reflects a lot of self-care habits. So resilience is dealing successfully with your obligations, your roles, but also with your relationships. As we know, roles and relationships are affected by our ABCs, by the way we feel, affect, the way we act, behavior, the way we think, our cognitions. And the way we behave and the way we think, these are habits. They are habits because they were learned. Whether intentionally or not, we were taught these ways of thinking, these ways of behaving. If we can become aware of our habits of thinking and behaving, because they were learned, they can be relearned. It's just, it happened unintentionally. It happened automatically before. Automatically, a child grows up and learns, am I loved? Automatically, a child grows up and learns, can I trust others? Can I trust that others will care for me? This doesn't happen intentionally, it just happens. This is something that we have all been taught. Various ways that we've been taught this. Some of us have been taught, yeah, you are lovable. People will take care of you. You can trust people. Others have not been taught that. But the thing about my job, the thing about your job, the thing that we understand about the way people think habitually, the way people act habitually, is if they become aware of it, they can change it. It was learned, it can be relearned. It was learned, might not be able to unlearn it, but you can learn a side language. Might not be able to stop that inner monologue, I'm no good, but you can learn another monologue and says, no, I know I keep telling myself I'm no good, but I am good. Thoughts and behaviors can be changed. And if we can change them, we can do better in roles and relationships. We can do better in our self-compassion, do better in combating, preventing compassion, fatigue, and burnout. I would recommend these 5 key resilience practices. None of them are particularly hard. Some of them are sort of so obvious that they get neglected. They're sort of so obvious that we don't necessarily think about them and don't engage in them. The first is communion with God, which is a behavior. A second is self-care, a group of behaviors. The third and fourth are how we think, how you think about thinking more realistically and thinking more realistically. I've already hinted at thinking more realistically about yourself, thinking more realistically about others, and supportive relationships. These are things that you can do, ought to do, starting with communion with God. Ask yourself, how is your prayer and your contemplative life? This is ultimately important. And again, so many examples. We Lutherans, we don't say we're going to live like Christ, but he does give us a lot of good examples of how to live, especially perhaps examples of how to live in communion with God. So many examples in the Gospels of Christ going off to speak with his Father, to be comforted by his Father, presumably. In Luke, we read, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. In Matthew, we read, after he had dismissed them, after a long day, part of his 75 hours of work that week, probably more, after a long day, he dismissed them, went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. He went up, and he was still there when evening came. He was there alone. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. He was tired. He needed some comfort. He needed to be strengthened. And he knew what he needed. He needed to be in communion with his Father. Your prayer life, your scriptural life. Read Scripture. If you're particularly exhausted, read it even more that day or that week. God's Word gives us wisdom. God's Word sanctifies us. God's Word gives us life. God's Word makes us righteous. Immerse yourself, not just while at the seminary, but throughout your career, immerse yourself in God's Word. Probably the most important thing you can do for yourself. Don't neglect self-care. Take care of your well-being. Actively work to protect and enhance physical wellness. Train yourself to say to your church, actually, Tuesday mornings is when I go for a bike ride with my wife. Tuesday mornings is when we go to the gym and exercise together. Tuesday mornings is when I spend it with my wife and just by chance the two of you go for walks around the neighborhood. Take care of your well-being. Plan for and make healthy and attractive food choices. I put the words "and attractive" because healthy doesn't mean unattractive. Healthy food, took me a while to realize this, healthy food doesn't have to taste bad. There's a difference between the way my mom cooked and the way my wife Ruth cooks. But anyway, healthy food choices can taste good, it turns out. Difference between a store-bought tomato and a homegrown tomato. But both of these, actively work, plan for and engage in enjoyable physical activity. Plan. When are you going to next get some exercise? When are you going to next do something fun? One of the things I do with couples when I did couples counseling, I would say to them, kind of like I did to that young man, when's the last time the two of you went out and just had fun? And it's basically a rhetorical question because they're here seeing me because their marriage is in distress. I know they don't do much fun together. It's really important for couples to not just do the business of family. It's very important for a husband and a wife not just to talk about who's going to pick up the kids, how are we going to get this laundry done. We need to refill the fridge with food because the kids keep eating it. How are we going to get to the parent-teacher conference on time? Who's going to pick up the kid from volleyball, from soccer, from football? We got to sit down and work out our budget for next month. Business, 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 all really important business, but what about doing fun things? Because you didn't fall in love over business. You didn't fall in love arguing about who's going to pay for the meal that you invited her to. No, you fell in love because you were doing fun things, going to movies, listening to music, just talking about your favorite books, going out with other couples. But you did it just spontaneously. You were young. You didn't have anything important in your life going on. That's called college. College kids don't plan Friday nights. Something will come up. They don't plan what they're doing. What are you doing Saturday? I don't know, something. And they're right. They don't know, but they will do something. We get to adulthood, it's not quite that easy. We can't rely on feeling energetic at the end of a Friday and doing something fun, because you're not going to feel energetic. So what do? What we do is we plan. We're going out every Thursday night is mom and dad's date night. Heard that before? Date night? That's where this comes from. When do you exercise? What about planning meals? What about having healthy meals? These are things that used to be pretty easy just to do them. Now they take a little bit of effort, a little bit of planning, maybe a lot of effort, maybe a lot of planning. But they're probably more important now than they were back in your carefree days. Self-care is rest, getting enough sleep, it's diet, it's exercise, hobbies and recreation. What do you do for fun? You like to work wood? When's the last time you did some woodworking? You like to fish? How many times did you fish this year? Like to golf? How many times do you get out and golf? My pastor, Pastor Carl Fabrice, is as busy as he was at our church. Every Monday over summer, he would go out and golf with a fellow pastor. That was his day. My mentor in grad school, I'd say to him, I went to his home often. He invited me there. I wasn't stalking or anything. He invited me there often. I said, well, how about Thursday afternoon? Would you be available to meet then? He said, nope, Thursday's beer night. Thursday was when he and several of his colleagues got together and had beer. And this was before IPAs. So what do you do for fun? When's the last time you had some time away? What do you and your wife do for fun? And talking about indisciplining kids does not count. Worrying about kids does not count. When's the last time you and your wife, when's the last time you and your spouse went on a date and just enjoyed each other's company? Maybe even have to set up a rule. We're not going to talk about the kids. We're just going to enjoy each other's company. It's a really important aspect of self-care. Again, the previous examples of Christ praying are also example of his need for solitude, his need for time away from the stresses of his job, if I can put it like that. He loved his people. He loves us. He took care of the needs of his people. He takes care of our needs. But it was wearisome. And he needed his time alone. He needed his time to go off to a solitary place where he could pray and be reinvigorated, be re-energized, so that he could rest, so that he could continue his ministry the following day. Again, a brief word about exercise. I gave that already. It doesn't have to be a marathon. A brief word about diet. Research into diet is hard. You can just think about the the Food and Drug Administration, they came out with, I don't even know what the modern thing is. It used to be a food pyramid, then they turned it into a plate. Apparently circles are harder than triangles, but no one knows what the FDA is talking about when it comes to food. Looking at research into diet is really, really hard, but it's nonetheless ambiguous, which is that there's too much focus on fasting and eating things that taste terrible. A good diet tastes terrible and is very small. That's not a good diet. That diet stinks. That's a terrible diet. No, don't worry about what you should eliminate from your diet, but what you might add to it. Add fruits and vegetables, basically. Focus on what else you can be eating. And again, things that you enjoy. My daughter doesn't enjoy pineapple. I don't understand it. I could eat nothing but pineapple for the rest of my life. She doesn't like it. Maybe I got all the pineapple genes. I'm not sure about that. She doesn't like pineapple. That's okay. More for me. I don't like, and I don't want any arguments about this, but if cake or pie, everyone could raise their hand because everyone feels strongly about this like I do. I just don't like pie. If I did, I would eat it. Cake is so much better for you. Don't worry about what you shouldn't be eating, what you should be eliminating. But if you're eating more apples and more pineapple and more vegetables, there's going to be less room for these other foods that are unhealthy for you. So let's not overcomplicate exercise. Let's not overcomplicate diet. But they are important. Two versions of be realistic. This is the way we think. Realism, thinking realistically, being realistically, thinking realistically. Asking you here to think about your thinking. We refer to that as metacognition. Think about your thinking. Don't just let your thinking happen. Luther advised this all the time. Think about your thinking and don't pay attention to your thoughts. Mind your perspective and keep things in perspective. Work on an optimistic outlook, a hopeful outlook. Understand that normal changes across the lifespan and accept that change is part of life. That's an important thing for us to do. Life changes. We lose our hearing. We lose our capacity to do what we used to do. My uncle got really, really sad when he could no longer do the black slopes on the ski hill, resigned to the green slopes with me and others like me. He was really sad about not being able to, but he was in his 70s. Life changes. We accept that. We roll with it if we can. We seek out rewarding challenges and hobbies. Be mentally active. Do things for fun. Continue to read. I remember going through grad school and going to sleep one night, and it happened several nights in a row, 3 or 4 nights in a row, maybe a couple weeks. I was dreaming about my dissertation. Not good. I woke up one morning having dreamt the numbers 12.7. Don't know what that meant, except that I woke up and I said to myself, I'm going crazy. I realized, I'd known for a while, but it really came full force to me that working on my dissertation and then going to bed was not good for my sleep. Also realized, I'd known it for a while, I haven't read a book for pleasure since back in high school. So the next morning, I went to the library at Northwestern and I got out East of Eden. I wanted it to be some fancy literature because figured that might help with my own writing. It didn't, but I could justify reading something if it was fancy, good literature, and I read it, and I haven't stopped reading for pleasure since. What do you do for pleasure? What do you do to keep yourself mentally active on top of what you do at your position? Be aware of your thinking. Think about your thinking. Be aware of your thinking. Recognize, as Shakespeare said, as so many have said, Marcus Aurelius had a version of this, things are neither good or bad, but thinking makes them so. Thinking determines feelings. It greatly influences our behavior. And as we see in the Bible, Paul tells us, Christ tells us, thinking is not always what it should be. Thinking is not always accurate. Change your thinking as needed. Change the way you think about yourself if you need to. Are you really all-powerful? Are you really obligated, even able to save everybody? Must you be available 52 weeks out of the year, 7 days every week, 24 hours every day? To some extent, yes, but can you go to your church administration, go to your elders, go to the church president and say, I can't do this. This isn't fair to my family. It's not fair to me. It's hurting my capacity as a pastor. Because trust me, we don't think about it. You need to bring it to our attention. And it's probably, are you telling yourself, no, I can't do that. I should never grow weary of doing good. That's what Paul demanded of me. No. Paul was saying, you're going to grow weary of doing good. So develop some resilience. Don't keep your needs to yourself, because if you do, no one's going to know about them. Be realistic about what you can do. Be realistic when thinking about yourself and about others. Be realistic about what you can do. Others may want a lot from you. They may even think they're being reasonable. That doesn't mean they are being reasonable. Be realistic even if others are not. You can learn to say no to certain demands. Maybe you don't have to be part of the committee that is deciding what ornaments not to put on the Christmas tree this year. Maybe that's a committee meeting you could skip. Might upset some people, but on the other hand, it might not. Nice to invite me, but I'm going to decline. I'm the president of my church. I told our pastor, said, please don't come to church council meetings, or now we have board of directors meetings, or this. Come do the opening prayer, any announcements, any questions for us, and then please leave and go home. And he was like, all right, if you say so. And he did, and I was delighted. Learn to say no to demands and requests outside your call and your duties and your obligations. Reflect on what God has called you to do rather than what others might want you to do. Pastor, we really need you to decide what color lights should go on the tree this year. Actually, you don't. That's adiaphora. Be realistic about what you can do. Evaluate your commitments and your priorities and your responsibilities regularly. Do you need to be at that finance meeting? Do you need to be at every meeting? Again, you're invited because they love you. They want you to be there. That doesn't mean that you should be there, because your spouse, your kids, kind of really want you to be home. Again, this is tough. And again, it might take you some training of your church, depending on your church. But my advice would be to find that one or two or three or four people in your church that seem like they are reasonable, that you know are reasonable, and say to them, these are some changes I have to make, or I'm going to burn out. They'd like to know that. They'd like to hear that. They'd probably like to help you do it. There are things that you should be doing: taking care of your family, attending to your prayer life, preparing for Sunday, preparing for Bible study on Thursday. Relegate and delegate. Use other people. Ask for help. Accept help. Pastor, do you want help doing this? No, I'll take care of it. No, don't do that. Pastor, you need help doing this? Well, now that you mention it, yeah, that would be good. Doesn't make you weak. Doesn't make you a bad pastor. Thinking about all of this, thinking about your own resilience, it's going to actually help you be a pastor. Keep an eye on your goals. Maybe keep track of your goals. We really do need a watch for pastors to keep track of your steps. I'm joking, but it's not a bad idea on the other hand. What are your goals? And by the way, I don't know what your church body does or what your church in particular does, but I really don't like the idea of establishing goals for pastors to achieve this year and then reviewing how progress went this year. Here's your goal as a pastor: preach Christ crucified. Because that gives people all things that they need. Preach Christ crucified. But if there are goals, if you do have a goal of writing a book, if you do have a goal of presenting at a certain conference, if you do have a goal of raising enough money to add to your church, to your school, keep an eye on those goals, keep track of them so that you can keep attending to them. Because if you have these realistic, realizable, important goals, you want to keep them in focus. You're going to do a call back to your family. Your family well-being is not a goal. It's essential for your well-being. But you have to make it a priority. You have to make the welfare of your family, the welfare of you yourself, you have to make it a priority. What are your priorities? Well, I can show you my priorities. My priorities are on my calendar, on my phone here. I can tell you when I next teach class, which is Tuesday, 11 to 12:15, and then again from 1 to 2:15. These are priorities. How do I know they're priorities? Because they're planned. They're on my calendar. When is your next date on your calendar? When is your next date with your spouse on your calendar? When is the next time you are going out and doing something fun? When is your next beer night? When is your next golf outing? If you don't make it a priority, it won't happen. Related to that, do you have certain goals that are important to you, that you want to achieve? Keep track of them. Put them on your calendar weekly. I'm going to work on this. I would have never gotten through my book if I hadn't done that. Thinking about emotions. Thinking is called metacognition. Thinking about emotions is called emotional intelligence. Being aware of emotions. Understand and accept what you're feeling. Don't always understand what we're thinking, or don't always understand why we feel what we feel, but work on understanding what you're feeling. I don't know why I'm so irritated. I don't know why I'm so sad. I don't know why I'm anxious. I'll tell you how I know I'm anxious. I start to bite my nails. When I bite my nails, it's kind of like the cat and the bell around the cat's neck. When I start to bite my nails, I realize, oh, I'm anxious about something. I wonder what it is. I know it doesn't make me sound very intelligent, but that's how it is. I must be anxious about something. And I think about what's going on. To understand what you're feeling, but also accept it. I'm anxious about something. I wonder what it is. And I think about what it is. And I realize, you know what? That's not actually something that I probably need to be anxious about. but I am, so whatever. I accept. We try to accept what we're feeling, so that we can then communicate our feelings appropriately. Back to our behaviors are related to, our behaviors are internal. Our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors, these are internal. They affect our roles, our relationships, our obligations, our friendships, our loved ones. Communicating feelings appropriately is about our behavior. How do you communicate when you're sad? How do you communicate when you're angry? Anyone who says to you, I can't help my behavior when I feel angry, is lying to you. That's a lie. Our feelings, rather our behavior, including abusive behavior, which we attribute to, which we blame on how we felt, no, that's a choice. We don't do anything that we don't plan on doing unless we have a serious mental illness. Communicate feelings, including anger, appropriately. We don't act abusively. We don't act angrily. Instead, we say calmly, I'm very angry right now, for example. In other words, we interact respectfully and safely at all times with regard to our emotions. Doing this, we will develop our emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence means that we understand what we're going through, how we're feeling. And even in deeper level, we understand what we're thinking leading us to feel this way. Or deeper still is we wonder what we're thinking leading us to feel this way, but we don't quite understand why we feel this way, but we accept it. I don't know why I'm so sad today. I just am. And then I can deal with it appropriately. I can manage it appropriately. At least in accepting it is the first step in appropriate management of our emotions. We can also attend to what others are feeling. The more you understand your own feelings, the better you are going to be able to understand others' feelings. And you can accept what they are feeling. And you can respond sensitively to what they're feeling. Calling back to earlier, you can accept that someone is feeling terrible about themselves, but you don't agree with it. You can accept and understand they're saying that to themselves bad things about themselves. I'm not a good mom. I'm not a good worker. I'm not a good wife. I'm a failure. No, you're not. I understand that you think these things. I understand that they make you feel bad. I understand that you feel badly. I accept that. But I don't believe what you're saying to yourself. We can challenge people who can respond sensitively to others. Other aspects of mental resilience: be aware and beware certain thought habits. All or nothing. That was a great sermon. If it wasn't great, it was awful. That's not true. If you preached Christ crucified, it was a great sermon. But there's a lot of all or nothing thinking. And I think we are encouraging that in our youth. All or nothing. You must be perfect. Not only you must be perfect, but you can be perfect. We need you to be perfect. This is where their higher levels of anxiety and depression are coming from. Things are not either great or a catastrophe. Imperfection is acceptable. Fortunately, it's acceptable because it's inevitable. You cannot be perfect. Black or white thinking, it's all them or all me. If I tell someone about my needs, I've ruined our relationship. If I share with the church what I'm struggling with, they're going to think less of me because I'm not perfect. I need to only be dedicated to their needs, not my own. This black or white thinking is really unhealthy. Personalizing blame. Any problem at the church is your fault? Really? You're probably the only one thinking that. Can't gossip about the person or persons that are causing the problem, but you don't blame yourself for all problems. You do have to deal with problems. Selective perception. This is the fancy term for only focusing on the negative. Selectively focusing on the negative. Refer to that earlier in Luther's letter to von Stockhausen as magnification. We see the slightest thing as a problem. That's selective perception. It's unhealthy. Common errors of thinking. I used this term earlier. I can and must fix all problems in the church. That's not true. It's terrible if someone doesn't appreciate what I do for them. I've put myself out to this person, this sufferer, this victim, and they must appreciate it. They should appreciate it. It's terrible that they don't appreciate it. No, that's total violation of what we know about human nature. By nature, we are sinful and unclean. We say that every Sunday. People don't always appreciate the things you do for them, and you need to understand and forgive them for that. It's not true that you have enough time, enough money, enough material, even enough skills, training to fix anything going on in your church. Likewise, it's not true that you can do it all alone, on your own. You are Superman and you can do everything on your own. Simply not true. It's an error in thinking this way. It's also an error in thinking that people need more than I can give. People might want more than you can give. People might be disappointed. They might even express disappointment in what you can give. But you are giving all things needful. Martha, she has all things needful. She's sitting at my feet listening to me. You give people all things needful when you preach Christ crucified. There are other things you can do for them. Great. There are many things that you're not going to be able to do for them. Resilience means being realistic, avoiding certain errors in thinking. Only the great victories are worth celebrating. Actually, the greatest victory that perhaps is one of the ones you celebrated most recently, but maybe you didn't even celebrate it, was the baptism of that infant. The confirmation class that you had last week. That was a great victory. And you should celebrate it as that. It's the little things that matter. It's that sermon. It's that lesson. It's that bringing the child into Christ's family. Replace these with more so-called rational thinking. There's irrational thinking and rational thinking. A psychologist by the name of Albert Ellis wrote a self-help book called A Guide to Rational Thinking, published probably 50 years ago now, about not being irrational. One of the things that Ellis taught us was about the so-called, quote, tyranny of the shoulds. If you say to yourself, when I hear a client say to themselves, I should have done this, I should not have done this, I should have done this, I should not have done that, they are tyrannizing themselves with the word should. Should means I didn't, but I should have, or I did, but I should not have. I was wrong, I was wrong, I was wrong, I was not perfect. Try to be more rational. Keep in mind what success is. Value the small victories, cherish the small moments. Was it the raising of Lazarus that was the greater victory, or the sitting the child on his lap? Parishioners and friends delight in the small things you do. Keep that in mind. keep in mind, it might not make you comfortable, but it doesn't matter, because what you're doing is important and therefore probably makes you uncomfortable at least. Keep in mind how important you are to people. And the small things that you do, how important they are. Showing up to the confirmation party, smiling to someone on the way out of church. It's maybe a small thing to you, but it's not to us. Be rational in your thinking. The need will always be greater than the resources. There will always be need. There will always be the poor with us. But you are helping. Are you fixing it all? Are you getting rid of all? No. But you are helping. And again, you're providing the thing that is most needful. Parishioners and friends, understand that you have a life of your own that needs attention. The only one that's not saying that out loud, or at least thinking that, is you. When you say that to them, they're going to say, well, of course, what can I do? Hopefully they do that. Some churches might not, but that church needs some education about how to take care of their pastor. And if you're their pastor, you're the one that has to educate them about that. Is that easy? No. But it is necessary. Last key resilience practice, also behavior. So communion with God, behavior. Self-care, behavior. Being realistic about yourself, being realistic about others, being realistic about others' expectations, even if they're not realistic. Those are thoughts, and back to a behavior which is supportive relationships. Probably number 1 and number 5 might be the most important. And call back to earlier, question of what's more important, changing behavior or changing cognitions. Changing behavior can help you change your cognitions. This is a perfect example of that. Supportive relationships. Remember, all work and no play. Pay attention to your social life. You want to make and keep connections. Regularly connect with others. Engage in rituals, the ritual of a birthday celebration. Routines, the routine of going out weekly with your spouse. The tradition that your family holds. Keep doing that. Regularly connect with other people. If you regularly do it, it means it's on your calendar, and it also means that you have something to look forward to. One of these days, we got to have that family reunion. No, we do it every year in August, for example. Maintain supportive social networks and close kin relationships. Have access to sufficient community resources. Let's talk a little bit more about the importance of supportive relationships. You, like the Rolling Stones, are on stage your entire career. Yes, I'm comparing you to Mick Jagger. Your wife thinks that about you, you might as well know that. You, like the Rolling Stones, are on stage. You're the one on stage, kind of like I'm on stage. You're the one in front of people. You're the one in front of your members, of your congregation. And you are on stage your entire career. Like the Rolling Stones, you need a good backstage. Mick isn't plugging in the microphone himself. Keith Richards is not, you can watch videos of this, Keith Richards is not the one tuning his guitar. If you've seen the Beatles documentary by Peter Jackson, how many times we saw George Harrison hand the guitar over to someone to tune it? This is the backstage. People in the back of the stage help the performer, the person on the front of the stage, the person on stage, The backstage is where you find your help. You need a good backstage too. Backstage players help you review and improve your front stage performance. What went well, what did not go well? Maybe rehearse future performances. I was thinking about saying this on Sunday. Help you improvise and generate new ideas for the stage. Again, I don't want to be overly familiar with calling it stage, what you do, but you are the one out in front, and you do need support in your back, and you probably have it already. You have people that you, if you don't, you need. You have people, hopefully, that help you with the emotional sustenance, that are regularly expressing to you genuine love and care and understanding. Someone who can celebrate the good and commiserate with the bad. The backstage benefits, besides the cigarette given to Keith Richards there, that's one of the backstage benefits. You need someone in the backstage definitely to give you cigarettes. Looks like Jimi Hendrix to me on the one picture there. But anyway, the backstage, you get better, you deal better with the inevitable stresses and challenges. You get information, you get advice, you get to normalize the bad experiences. You get to hear from an older pastor or another pastor, yeah, that's happened to me too. Or that used to happen to me all the time. Don't take it personally. You're not alone in this. That's pretty common. Significant others are absolutely essential. So many paintings of Luther with his family, playing the lyre, singing. He loved to sing. He loved to create music. Significant others are absolutely essential, but this is your life partner. This person, your spouse, feels everything you feel, maybe more. You're aggravated, she's furious. So be careful about overwhelming them. They're sympathetic. This isn't empathy. Oh, I understand how you feel. No, I feel what you feel. They're sympathetic. They're involved personally. They suffer with you. So you probably want to be careful about overwhelming them. Relying only on them, in other words. Instead, seek out similar others. The Beatles and the Stones actually really liked each other. The reason when John and Paul and George and Ringo met Elvis, they left and they said to each other, wow, he did all of that on his own. He had no one else. We have each other. The four of us have each other. They couldn't believe the stress that Elvis must have been under, being all alone. So the Beatles were four, the Stones were at least four, depending on which version you look at. So find similar others who are similar others, other pastors. What's your communion like with other pastors? Other pastors are also doing what you do. They are also on the front. They're also on stage. They can empathize. They have similar experience. They have probably an in-depth understanding of the demands and the complexities of your life. They've been there. They are your best resource, other pastors. And if you don't have that resource yet, develop it. So that you can hear someone say, as we alluded to earlier this morning, so you can hear someone say, of course you feel that way. I felt the same way. I've had the same experience. Don't take it personally. This is how I dealt with it when I had this situation pop up. They can share feelings and worries Rather, you can share with them feelings, worries, with less fear of being criticized or sanctioned. You can share with another pastor what the struggles that you're going through, understanding that he's likely not going to take this on as a burden. He can provide, or you can provide to another pastor, valid feedback, expertise, expert critique, insights into opportunities for improvement. They can serve as a role model. They have their own repertoire of strategies that they can rely on. Look how much Luther relied on Melanchthon. Look how much Luther relied on others. Luther, you got to wonder what Katie thought of this. We're having people for dinner again, Martin? How many times he had people over? You just got to wonder. Again, but he couldn't have done what he did without. And we can have no doubt at times at table someone said, Martin, I'm not sure I agree with you here. And he listened to them and maybe even was persuaded otherwise. The activities, and this goes to, again, the brilliant insight that was offered earlier. What's more important, changing the way we think, or is it changing what we do in order to change what we think? Doing this helps you change the way you think. The activities you engage in with your backstage members, your family, your friends, and especially probably your colleagues, your fellow pastors, automatically help you become more realistic. Automatically help you think more realistically, which helps you be more resilient. So what can you do? Awareness and balance and connections. Different version of ABC. Awareness and balance and connections. Be aware that you are by definition at risk of compassion fatigue. Be aware of the symptoms of compassion fatigue. When you find yourself tired, well, maybe it's explainable. We just got through the Christmas season. Of course I'm tired. Or irritable, impatient, not usually like that. Your wife comments that you seem especially irritated or impatient. Check yourself. Ask yourself what's going on. Recognize that this is not actually what you are, who you are, but this might be a symptom of you sliding into compassion fatigue. Admit it's a problem. Admit it's something that you're sliding into. Again, it's not all or none. It's kind of like when I described anxiety earlier. Some of us are very anxious by nature. Some of us not anxious at all by nature. I have one of each in my kids. A son who doesn't get anxious about anything, and he's always late. Another son who gets anxious about everything and shows up 5 minutes early. Which is better? Not sure. But compassion fatigue is something that develops over time. And as you see yourself going into it, realize that you're starting to experience, address it. Can't address it unless you're aware of it. Can't address it unless you acknowledge it. Don't try to cover it up. Really important. This is another book that I'll never get around to writing, but I should, because it's a really important notion. Your best traits are your greatest vulnerability. Back to Superman. Superman was from Krypton. If you don't know that, leave right now and go read some comic books. No, Superman was from Krypton, the planet Krypton, which was destroyed. But pieces of Krypton, we call it kryptonite, endured. Some of those pieces ended up on Earth. And the one thing that the thing that made Superman strong was Krypton. The thing that he was most vulnerable to was kryptonite. Okay, that's a really tortured analogy, but stick with me here. Your greatest weakness, how much you care about others, is also your greatest vulnerability. It's simply true. My son is one of his great strengths is he never gets nervous. Sometimes we want him to get nervous so that he shows up on time. Be aware of and accept your limitations. That's awareness. Balance. This is, you hear this so often, it's practically trite, but it's actually true. Work-life balance. So I'm not a fan of that expression because part of your life is work, but part of your life is not work. Part of your life is enjoyment with your family. Family has a lot of work to it, but family also should have a lot of joy with it. So it's not really a work-life balance so much as it is things I must do, things I enjoy doing. That's the balance. If you aren't doing things that you enjoy, if you're not enjoying work, it might be a sign of compassion fatigue. There should be some things at work that you do enjoy. If the only time you spend with your spouse is taking care of business of the family, you're not going to enjoy each other's company so much after a while. You're going to start to avoid each other. Not really, but what do you do for fun? When's the last time you two went out and just had fun? Take time out during the day. Go to lunch. Take vacations, presumably with your family. Maintain discipline in daily responsibilities and duties. This goes back to the cognitive advice about resilience. Be clear in your own head. Help others if they need help with their unrealistic expectations. Keep your expectations of yourself. Strive to get other people to keep their expectations of you, of what you can do, realistic. Keep in mind what are your actual demands and expectations and obligations. Again, summarized as preach Christ crucified. If you are doing that, you are fulfilling God's call for you. But there are lots of imaginary, lots of imagined, created out of whole cloth expectations of what the pastor should do, must do, is obligated to do. Try to change the little things that might irritate you, that might gnaw at you. Accommodate those things that you can't change. Figure out a way to just accept them, which is really dealing with them. Can't change them. They're irritating. I'm obligated to do. This is something that I actually have to do. Smile, go do it, but don't get upset with yourself if you're not enjoying it. Organize your time so that you can concentrate on vital tasks, such as your family. Organize your time so that you do have regular time with your spouse, with your kids. Organize your time so that you do have those hours needed to study the Bible and prepare your sermon. Organize your time so that you can take care of your prayer life, your contemplative life. Make these priorities. When are you going to exercise? If you're like me, you're never going to want to exercise, but you should because it's good for your mental. So when are you going to? Priorities are things, like I said, I teach on Tuesdays at 11 and at 1. Priorities are things that are in our calendar so that we don't forget them. We plan, we anticipate, we regularly, routinely do things, and that's how we organize our times with regard to what we consider to be important. Connections. Learn to ask for help. C is for connections. Learn to ask for help. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you if you need help. You do need help. Everyone needs help. We don't have to call it that, but There's no shame in doing that. Develop your support team. Reach out to a pastor in the area. Fortunately, we have Zoom now. We have Microsoft Teams. Zoom is better, sorry. We have Microsoft Teams. We have FaceTime. Meet regularly with another pastor or two or three. Meet regularly and get support from them. Be supportive to them. In our program, we have group supervision, which means that students, as they're learning to do therapy, they gather as groups with a faculty member, such as me, and one of the students talks about the clients that they're seeing, and the other students listen, they ask questions, they make suggestions, they listen to my suggestions, my questions, and the one student seeing the patient is not the only one learning. They're all learning. You supporting, and I learn a tremendous amount doing that. And you yourself know that by now. By teaching, you have taught yourself so much. By being on a support team, you will be someone else's support team. You will teach yourself so much about the importance of support, about your own need for support. Be planful and committed in connections. Don't wait to want to do it. It's really a good principle, should really be a bumper sticker. Don't wait to want to do it. There are so many things that we must do that we don't want to do. You must go out. So again, the party on Friday. With depressed patients, I say to them, when's the last time you did something fun? And I already know what they're going to say, which is they can't think of when the last time they did something fun. I say, well, you need to start doing fun things. I say, okay, I will. I say, well, I'm not done. Because I know what you just said isn't true. Because you're likely going to wait to want to do something fun before you do something fun. Problem is you're depressed. And you're never going to want to do something fun. That's part of depression. Plan to do something fun. Call your friend and say, let's do something Friday. And don't let me back out of it. Don't wait to want to do something. Schedule it so that it's done. Plan it in order to do it. Or any questions or comments or other suggestions?
I have one from this morning, if I can do that, just more thinking about caring for other people. You say a lot of times that 1 in 5 at any given time in a year aren't always recognized because you don't see the external signs of someone struggling. What kind of things might we sort of pay attention to find some of those silent sufferers in a congregation or in a community?
Yeah, so who might you want to reach out to? Request a meeting, request a home visit. I guess first and probably foremost, trust your instinct. Again, you are by nature caring people. If someone strikes you as being depressed or anxious or both, ask them for a meeting, ask them for a private meeting so that you can ask them how they're doing. Someone who avoids eye contact, maybe that's shyness, but someone who avoids eye contact might be someone who could benefit from having someone reach out. And smiling is, it's actually kind of hard to fake a smile. And even when smiles are fake, it's pretty easy to see that they're fake. So trust your instinct. Again, I walk into my home and my wife is upset about something, and my greatest concern is it me? But I know automatically. How do I know? I have no idea, except I know her face. But even faces that you don't know that well, it's pretty easy to tell. And there's a whole area of research, actually, it's part of the artificial intelligence research that's going on, facial recognition. How do you tell how someone is feeling? We just can't quite figure it out. There's such subtle changes in facial expressions to indicate that someone is upset, distressed. Trust your instinct and go with that. Probably don't say, "How are you doing?" as they're walking out, but probably do say, "Hi, great to see you. Hey, would you mind if I gave you a call this week?" Probably surprise them, which is fortunate because then they can't say no. Someone asks you to do something, automatically you say, "Yes." "Oh, what did I just agree to? Move a couch? Really? I just agreed to that?" You say, "Hey, can I give you a call this week?" "Sure." "Oh." Then they avoid your call if they know your phone number, but you just keep reaching out. But I would truly trust your instincts. If it seems like it, and it might be, and by the way, if you're wrong, you really haven't done any damage. If you're wrong, you say to someone, "You just look like you're not doing that well emotionally." They're going to be outraged. "How dare you say that?" No, they're going to say, "Oh, well, thank you for your concern. Actually, I was really distracted that day because I was waiting for my sister to text me about her breast cancer screening, because the first time it happened, it was, there was some suggestion that there might be some, but so I was concerned. Thank you for noticing, but she's fine. I'm fine." So at worst, it's going to be a nice gesture. Other questions or comments?
When I was finishing up my master's degree in mental health counseling, at the same time, I was pastoring a congregation in the synod, and I was also an Air Force Reserve chaplain at an Air Force base nearby. And I was able to bring, it was my last year, my last semester, basically. So I had a supervision course, and I did some clinical work as well. But I brought some of my counseling from the congregation and from my reserve unit to the psychologist who was my supervisor, and with our supervision group. Of course, it's all confidential. You're not mentioning names or who you're talking about. But I found that extremely helpful. And I think that pastors are very reticent, very hesitant to do that. And yet pastors have less training than the people who do that on a regular basis to make sure that they're seeing everything. Maybe that's something that you could comment on, and how helpful that would be if pastors can do that, either with a mental health professional with total anonymity of the clients, or with other pastors in a consortium of pastors. Is that something you can comment on?
Consulting with others about members?
About people, yes, about members that they may be seeing in the congregation for help, but to do it in a way that's safe, that will protect their identity, and yet that will make them confident. I don't know what to do, and rather than wing it and just pray for wisdom, maybe I can get wisdom from another human.
Yeah, and I think all of that is important. In fact, in the state of Wisconsin, if you are a practicing clinician, you have an obligation to meet regularly with other clinicians, other practitioners. And the reason we do that is because we miss things. It's just, it's a really good idea to chat with other clinicians about clients that you're seeing. And the way that, and so I've been in these, hundreds of times, these, not really group supervision. The group supervision is me supervising someone else. This is more of a group consultation. Sometimes referred to in hospitals, we call it case conferences, where a doctor will come in with this particular case, present it to a bunch of other physicians, and they talk about what's going on here. What do we think is going on? Really important practice.
And that's what pastors and chaplains do in a hospital setting too.
Correct.
In CPE, clinical pastoral education. That's
right.
Exactly what they do.
So of the hundreds of these I've been in, I don't think I ever heard a name. Or first name, age, gender, marital status, but never last name. So because it's sort of not relevant. It's not relevant. You know, if I know your name, the person's first name. So this is a 38-year-old white married female, 3 kids. The youngest is 16. The other 2 are off at college, and she's depressed. She's developed, you know, and we chat. So it's actually really easy to do. Just don't use names. You know, you've signed a form, I know you have, called the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act form, HIPAA. HIPAA says that there's certain information about a person that you cannot disclose without their permission, being their name, where they live, their social security number, but things like how old they are, their gender, their race, that doesn't define anyone in particular at all. So it'd be very easy to chat with other, and maybe not a bad way to organize or to get yourself to force yourself, if it were, to create a group of pastors, which is, let's get together regularly every other week and talk about the counseling that we're doing with our members. And inevitably that will lead to other discussions as well, more enjoyable discussions, presumably. But it'd be really easy to do. Just don't use someone's name. Don't use someone's name, and you're fine. So, and you know, and we do this. It's happening right now, somewhere in this state, probably several places right now, somewhere in this state, where a client is being talked about, medical patient, mental health patient, is being talked about with the group to, am I missing something? What would you do? What advice do you have? That's really, really good idea.
What do you think is the reason that pastoral counselors, pastors in particular, are so hesitant to do that?
To talk with others?
To talk with other peers, yeah.
I don't know. Probably just not something that they're used to doing. Maybe it's related to the fact that they wish that they weren't doing it at all, which is a different conversation. But if you are doing counseling, regular counseling with parishioners, again, I would have the rule of thumb of 5. 5 is easy to remember for some reason. If you're going to meet with them for more than 5 times, they probably need more counseling than what you are probably, maybe not able. You might be able to offer it. I'm confident that you would be able, but you just don't have the time to do it. And there are alternatives for them to seek. So maybe it's just that I realize I don't know why they wouldn't be doing that. Yes.
Just something to bring out from my career in the Navy and Mike's in the Air Force, that I observed. I was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, which had a large concentration of military as well as then chaplains. The Catholic chaplains seemed to have better mental health than the Protestant chaplains. And one of the reasons for that is they met every Sunday evening. And they were able to discuss things. The model for chaplaincy in the Navy was based on the Catholic sacrament of the confession. So we couldn't say anything to anybody about anything that was told to us without the permission of the individual. The individual says, I'm going to kill the commanding officer, and walks out. We can't call the commanding officer and warn him or her. There's an upside and a downside to that. But the Catholic chaplains got together every Sunday, and they were able to discuss, kind of like you were talking about, this circle of people who are all discussing this. And they got to unburden themselves, and that was something that they did in theater and back home, where I didn't have other Lutheran chaplains readily available. And my chaplain friends were different denominations and had different thought processes and things like that. Probably one of the nicest chaplains to me as taking care of me called me up and said, Carl, how are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm doing fine. He said, no, tell me the truth. I know who you work for. He was a Mormon. So that kind of camaraderie can take place amongst people we trust. But I think a number of our Lutheran Brethren churches are in small towns. There may not be a large ministerium, if there is one at all. And there's no gathering where we can unload without giving a name and have mutual conversation to identify the things we missed, or to unburden ourselves with the stresses of the job so that our mental health is just a little healthier.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, sharing with each other, caring for others, allowing yourself to be cared for. I guarantee if a pastor is struggling with a member who's got mental health issues and reaches out to another pastor, it's almost for certain that they will hear, you can only do so much. You can only do some, which is itself, you cannot fix this. Maybe you want to refer this person out. And because, again, we get so involved with the people that we care about that we don't sometimes realize that we've gotten so involved. So be careful what you're doing. Just, you clearly care about this person, but here's what I might suggest that you do. This is what I've done in these types of situations. I think, again, consulting with each other, it's just, it's required. It's required in the mental health field. It's probably required in medicine as well. The best practices are group practices. I went to a doctor for my shoulder, which wasn't working. Thought it was a torn rotator cuff. Saw someone who I knew specialized in that. He did an MRI, said, not a torn rotator cuff, you got a torn labrum. I don't fix those, but the guy next door in the next office does. I'll set up an appointment with him. Just an example of the advantage of working with each other. Yeah, lots of Lutheran Brethren ministers probably are in, somewhat isolated. I did a talk for the organization called Doxology in Alaska. It was in Seward, Alaska, and there were, I think, 15 guys there. 14 had their wives with them, which was great. But they were pretty isolated. Not that day, not those 2 days, but they were I just asked because I was curious, what's the closest two of you are? Someone raised their hand and says, about 150 miles. About 150 miles. And by the way, we can't drive to each other. We'd have to get in a plane, maybe a snowmobile to get there, which doesn't happen. So, but fortunately nowadays we have this technology called, again, FaceTime, Zoom. And if there were a regular Zoom time, everyone turn on their cameras, everyone have a beer in hand while we do this, and let's just talk. What do we talk about? If you need, think of something. I guarantee you'll find something to talk about. I've heard there are book clubs where they actually talk about the book. I've never seen it, but there's plenty to talk about. But you need a reason to talk. We're going to talk about Matthew. We're going to talk about the story of Lazarus. We're going to talk about Mary and Martha. We're going to, here's a topic, but I'd be surprised if within 10 minutes there wasn't just a general conversation. Do you want to be careful? We all did enough Zoom meetings during the stupid pandemic. More than about 5 on screen gets a little bit overwhelming. So, but 5 would be a nice number. 4 would be a nice number. Even 3 of you. And the occasional meeting one-on-one by Zoom, by FaceTime, gets a lot easier then as well. So, any other comments or questions? I thank you all for your attention and your very kind attention and treatment of me, and I'm very delighted that I was able to be here with you.